When we think of ancient Arabia, we often only recognize it as the birthplace of Islam, one of the world's major religions. However, it's not often acknowledged that ancient Arabia was home to thriving civilizations and powerful kingdoms. Its people built dams and canals to irrigate vast areas, were frequently mentioned by ancient writers, and their goods reached the farthest corners of the ancient world. Today, we're going to explore the history of the Arabian Peninsula during its pre-Islamic era. Arabia wasn't always the endless desert we imagine today. Between the 10th and 6th millennia BC, it was a lush land. Where sand dunes now dominate, there were once numerous freshwater lakes. The Rub al-Khali and Nafud Desert, now among the most inhospitable places on Earth, were once areas with large lakes fed by seasonal rains and a network of rivers. Vast stretches were covered with savannas full of gazelles, antelopes, saigas, and aurochs. These favorable conditions allowed for widespread human settlement. Across the Arabian Peninsula, many communities of hunter-gatherers and herders thrived, leaving behind distinctive stone tools, settlements, and remarkable examples of rock art. The scenes depict hunting and pastoral life, showing people with livestock and wild animals. These communities were small and mobile, moving with the seasons to take advantage of the rich resources in the grassy plains. They probably spoke Proto-Semitic languages, though we don't know exactly who they were. Around the start of the 5th millennium BC, the climate in Arabia began to change. Monsoons, which had been a reliable source of rain, weakened and shifted southward due to gradual changes in Earth's axial tilt. Lakes dried up, grassy landscapes shrank, and plants adapted to dry conditions took over. Eventually, the area started turning into a desert. These climate changes had a big impact on people's lives. The land became harder to live in. Some people left Arabia, moving to Mesopotamia and the Levant. Those who stayed gathered in places where water was still available, in the mountains, along the coast, and in oases fed by underground water. Between these settled islands, herders moved around, adapting to the growing desert and finding ways to graze their livestock despite the constant lack of water and vegetation. In the 3rd millennium BC, despite tough climate conditions, the first real urban centers appeared in Arabia. These centers popped up in the eastern part of the peninsula and in Oman, strategically located at the crossroads of trade routes linking the great civilizations of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. The Anar culture flourished in what is now the United Arab Emirates and Oman around 2700 BC. Cities with impressive stone architecture sprang up on the island of Anar in Hili and Tel Abrak. The tombs at Bat, Al-Qutum, and Al-An show advanced engineering skills and a sophisticated social structure capable of organizing large-scale construction projects. Local communities actively mined copper deposits and engaged in lively trade with Mesopotamia, where this region was known as the Land of Magan. Later in 2200 BC, the Dilmun civilization emerged in Bahrain and the nearby eastern coast of Arabia. It quickly became a major trading hub of the ancient world, acting as a crucial link between Mesopotamia, the Arabian Gulf, and the Indus Valley civilization. The main urban center at Qat al-Bahrain featured temples, residential areas, and strong fortifications. The Dilmunites seem to have had connections with the Akkadians, as shown by their kings' names, which clearly have East Semitic roots, and their use of Akkadian cuneiform as their writing system. This made them the first literate people in Arabia. However, most of their records are about administrative and economic matters. Dilmun's strategic location made it a key hub in maritime trade between the Indus Valley civilization, Arabia, and Mesopotamia. This is evident from the widespread use of Indus Valley measuring weights in Dilmun and the discovery of Dilmun seals in both the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia. Dilmun was a fully developed urban civilization with advanced crafts, long-distance trade, monumental architecture, and centralized governance. The Sumerians described Dilmun as an earthly paradise where the raven had not yet croaked, the partridge had not yet cackled, the lion did not kill, and the wolf did not carry off the lambs. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Dilmun is mentioned as a land where a plant grows whose fruits grant immortality. However, this plant was actually oysters, and the fruits were pearls. The Sumerians believed that eating crushed pearls in food granted immortality. In another Sumerian myth, after the Great Flood, the gods took Utnapishtim, the Sumerian version of Noah, to Dilmun, where they granted him eternal life. Some scholars think that Dilmun and its depiction in Sumerian Akkadian mythology served as an early model for the idea of paradise in biblical tradition. During the Bronze Age, the interior and western parts of Arabia developed in different ways. The central and northern areas of the peninsula, along with much of the Hejaz region near the Red Sea, were mostly dominated by a pastoral nomadic lifestyle. Settled communities were mostly small oasis settlements. Places like Tema and Dumat al-Jandal in the north were inhabited as early as the 2nd millennium BC. They weren't fully developed cities, but rather settlements clustered around oases. These locations were important stops on trade routes and also served as agricultural centers where dates and other crops were grown. Significant urban development in these areas only began in the 1st millennium BC. Another center of settled life emerged in the southwestern highlands and coastal plains of Yemen. Here, the monsoon climate provided plenty of irrigation, creating good conditions for agriculture. Between 2400 and 1800 BC, the agricultural culture of Sabir thrived, setting the stage for future urbanization. This culture left behind distinctive pottery with dotted and combed designs, impressive megalithic structures, and large settlements like Sabir and Ma'leba. The main challenge in studying this period is the almost complete absence of written records from Arabia itself. External sources like Mesopotamian texts sometimes mention regions such as Magan and Dilmun, but they rarely provide details about the people living in the interior of the peninsula. In fact, for much of the 9,000 years between the Green Arabia era and 1000 BC, we don't even know the names of the tribes and the peoples who lived there. However, at the start of the 1st millennium BC, references to tribes identified as Arabs start to appear in written sources. The earliest known mention is from 853 BC, found in the military records of the Assyrian king Shalmaneser III. In his account of the coalition of rulers he faced at the Battle of Kakar, Shalmaneser mentions Gindibu the Arab, who contributed 1,000 camels to the anti-Assyrian coalition. Thus, Arabs first appear in recorded history as participants in a significant conflict against Assyria. After this, Arabs frequently appear in Assyrian texts. Tiglath-Pileser III reports that around 738 BC, he received tribute from the Arab ruler Zabib, who is notably identified as a queen. Later, another ruler named Samsi is mentioned. It's remarkable that the first Arab rulers whose names have been preserved in written records were women. Later on, Sargon II, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal often mention the Arabs as tribes located on the southern edge of the empire, sometimes as enemies, sometimes as subjects. They always describe them as desert nomads associated with camel breeding and caravan routes. In Babylonian records, these tribes are often called Arabu. Nebuchadnezzar II in particular recorded campaigns against them. Together, these accounts consistently depict the Arabs as nomadic desert herders, organized into tribes and deeply connected with trade routes. They didn't have a unified state, and no known sources from that time mention a common Arab kingdom. However, they formed a distinct cultural and linguistic community, living in the northern and western parts of Arabia. They existed on the fringes of great empires, consistently interacting with them, yet they maintained their cultural and linguistic independence. While Assyrian kings were documenting Arab nomads in the north, a very different civilization was thriving in the far south of the peninsula, in the mountains and valleys of what is now Yemen. The Greeks aptly called this region Happy Arabia. Monsoon rains watered the mountain slopes, rivers nourished the valleys, and the fertile lands supported a huge settled population. It was here, rather than in the desert, that the most advanced states of pre-Islamic Arabia developed. For nearly 1.5 millennia, several states coexisted and competed with each other: Saba, Main, Qataban, Hadramaut, and Himyar. The prosperity of South Arabian civilization was rooted in agriculture, which might seem unlikely in such a dry region. However, South Arabian engineers developed highly advanced water supply technologies. They built underground channels from the mountain slopes to transport water over long distances, reducing evaporation losses. They also constructed large covered cisterns, known as masna, to collect rainwater for the dry season. Interestingly, in modern Arabic, this word means factory. The most impressive engineering achievement was the Great Marib Dam, one of the largest hydraulic structures of the ancient world, which irrigated over 9,000 hectares of land and provided food for tens of thousands of people. However, agriculture wasn't the only source of wealth for these kingdoms. In the mountain forests of Yemen and Hadramaut, trees produced highly valuable resin, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense was as precious as gold due to its rarity and wide range of uses. Babylonians and Persians used it in temple sacrifices, Greeks and Romans burned it during religious ceremonies and cremations, the Chinese used it in medicine, and Egyptians used it as a base for perfumes and oils for mummification. The Egyptian queen Hatshepsut even organized an expedition to Arabia to bring back 31 frankincense trees in tubs, with scenes of this journey preserved on temple reliefs in Thebes. Myrrh was even more expensive. According to ancient sources, it was valued at 3 times its weight in gold. It was used as an anointing oil, a base for cosmetics, an ingredient in cooking, and a crucial component of medicine. Herodotus, describing Greece around 450 BC, noted that the whole country is filled with aromas from Arabia and exhales an amazingly sweet smell. The incense route, a famous trade path, stretched about 2,000 kilometers from Yemen to Gaza on the Mediterranean coast. Pliny the Elder noted that the journey took 62 days by camel, which is roughly 2.5 million steps. He also expressed frustration over Rome's trade imbalance, pointing out that about 25 million denarii, or 100 tons of silver, went to South Arabia every year. This route was just the land part of a much larger network. South Arabian merchants, who were also skilled sailors, expertly used the seasonal monsoon winds for trips to India, East Africa, and even the islands of Southeast Asia. Goods from the Indian subcontinent and the Malay archipelago traveled through Yemeni ports on their way to Egypt, Greece, and Rome. The oldest and most famous of these kingdoms was Saba, also known as Sheba in the Bible. According to the Bible, the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, bringing with her 120 talents of gold, worth about $3.5 million today, along with spices, incense, and precious stones. Whether this visit actually happened is uncertain, as scholars debate if Sheba had become a full-fledged kingdom by the 10th century BC. However, it's clear that by the time the Book of Kings was written in the 6th century BC, the kingdom of Sheba and its wealth were well known in Canaan. Qarib-ul-Wattar, one of the most powerful Sabaean kings, ruled during the 8th and 7th centuries BC. He expanded his kingdom from Najran to the Gulf of Aden and established diplomatic ties with Assyria and Egypt. However, over time, Salah's influence declined. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, Himyar rose to prominence as the leading power, the youngest yet most ambitious of the South Arabian kingdoms. The Himyarite kings gradually conquered their neighbors, uniting almost the entire southern peninsula under their control, effectively creating a regional empire. The civilization left behind an impressive legacy of thousands of stone inscriptions, grand temples, dams, and palaces. However, after the spread of Islam, it faded into obscurity for over 1,000 years. It wasn't until the 19th century that scholars began to decipher these inscriptions, bringing back the memory of a civilization that, for 15 centuries, was one of the wealthiest regions of the ancient world. Despite the literacy of the civilization in southern Yemen, they did not leave behind extensive chronicles or literary works. Our knowledge of their religion mainly comes from archaeological discoveries and stone inscriptions. These inscriptions reveal the names of the gods, help us track how often they were mentioned in religious texts, and allow us to partially piece together the pantheon and belief system. The gods of South Arabia were closely connected to natural elements like the sun, moon, water, and fire. The main god of Saba was Almaka, the moon god and the protector of irrigation. Alongside him, the god Athtar was worshipped, a male version of the deity linked to the Mesopotamian Astarte or Ishtar, also associated with the planet Venus. In South Arabia, as in many other ancient Middle Eastern cultures, temples served more than just a religious function. They played important economic and administrative roles, storing grain, organizing construction and irrigation projects, and handling legal matters. For example, agreements were certified in these sacred places. In a later period, at the beginning of a new era, a large number of Jews moved to Arabia to escape Roman persecution. While there were already small Jewish communities in Arabia, the migration became significant after the Romans crushed the Jewish revolt and destroyed the Second Temple in 70 AD. Most of these Jews settled along the Hijaz coast, where they found opportunities in farming and benefited from the caravan trade routes that boosted commerce. These Jewish refugees brought with them new religious beliefs, mainly Judaism and Christianity. In the Himyarite kingdom, the worship of a single supreme god, Rahman, the All-Merciful, was common. This name is familiar to Muslims today, as it later became part of the Islamic phrase Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim, meaning, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Even as Judaism and Christianity spread in Himyar during the 4th and 5th centuries, the name Rahman continued to be used as a title for the Abrahamic god. Many inscriptions mention Rahman, the Lord of the Jews, while Himyarite Christians referred to Jesus as the son and prophet of Rahman. It's hard to say if the early Himyarite worship of Rahman was true monotheism. It might have been a form of henotheism or monolatry, where other gods are acknowledged, but only one is considered supreme and worthy of worship. We don't have any religious texts that directly address this question. However, it's clear that even before the birth of the Prophet Muhammad, the people of Arabia were already moving towards a monotheistic worldview. In the 4th century BC, a group emerged beyond the Jordan River, initially described by ancient writers as desert nomads. Diodorus Siculus was amazed by their customs. The Nabataeans didn't sow grain, plant orchards, drink wine, or build permanent houses. Breaking these rules was punishable by death. This reflected a kind of respect for desert freedom and a deep-seated mistrust of anything that tied a person to one place. Yet within a few generations, the Nabataeans adopted a settled lifestyle and built one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world, Petra. This city, carved into pink sandstone amidst the mountains of modern-day Jordan, thrived at the crossroads of trade routes between Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Its fame was so widespread that it's even mentioned in the Chinese chronicles of the Han Dynasty under the name Likan. The Nabataeans controlled the trade of frankincense and myrrh, which traveled from Yemen to the north. They charged foreign merchants a fee, demanding up to a quarter of the cargo's value for passage through their territory. The real marvel of the Nabataean civilization was not just their architectural achievements, but also their advanced hydraulic engineering. In the harsh desert, where rain was scarce, Nabataean engineers created a complex network of underground cisterns, aqueducts, and channels carved from rock. They carefully collected every drop of rainwater and distributed it over long distances. Remarkably, some of these cisterns, built over 2,000 years ago, still serve local communities today. In the 4th century BC, Antigonus, a Hellenistic ruler and one of Alexander the Great's successors, tried 3 times to capture Petra. However, his Greek forces, not suited for desert warfare, faced strong resistance each time. Eventually, Antigonus had to give up his ambitions and make a treaty with the Nabataeans, a pact respected by later Hellenistic rulers, including both the Seleucids and the Ptolemies. The Nabataean kingdom's hereditary monarchy began in the 2nd century BC, when King Aretas I took the throne in 169 BC. During the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the Nabataeans clashed with the Hasmonean kingdom, pushing back against its southern expansion. Under King Aretas III in 84 BC, the Nabataeans successfully captured Damascus and parts of Syria. The kingdom reached its peak under King Aretas IV, who ruled from 9 BC to 40 AD. During his reign, Petra thrived as a bustling city with over 30,000 residents. It became a lively center where merchants from Egypt, Greece, Rome, India, and Arabia gathered. Despite Roman expansion around this time, Nabatea managed to maintain its independence and build friendly relations with Rome. Notably, Nabataean troops joined forces with Rome during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. However, in 105 AD, after King Rabel II's death, Trajan annexed Nabatea into the Roman Empire, forming the province of Arabia Petraea, named after the city of Petra. Although Nabataean culture didn't disappear right away, trade routes gradually shifted, leading to Petra's decline in importance. The most lasting legacy of the Nabataeans turned out to be their script. The Nabataean alphabet, which came from Aramaic and was used in trade documents, evolved over the centuries. From this script, the Arabic script developed, and today it's used by over 1.5 billion people worldwide. By the 4th century AD, Himyar had become the leading power in South Arabia, but its strength made it a target for other regional states. 3 external forces, the Byzantine Empire, the Kingdom of Aksum, and Sassanid Iran, aimed to control the southern Arabian Peninsula, attracted by its strategic ports and trade routes connecting the Mediterranean Sea and the Indian Ocean. Aksum, located in the Ethiopian highlands, was a natural rival to Himyar. Separated only by the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, both claimed dominance over the transit trade passing through it. There was also a linguistic connection between them. The language of the Aksumites shared the same South Arabian roots as those of the South Arabian peoples. In the 4th century, Aksum adopted Christianity and allied with Byzantium. From the east, across the Persian Gulf, Sassanid Iran kept a watchful eye on the Arabian Peninsula. The state that controlled the Bab el-Mandeb effectively dominated maritime trade between India and the Mediterranean, a fact well known to all parties involved in the conflict. Religion became a significant factor in this confrontation long before any overt invasion. The ruling elite of Himyar followed Judaism, with Jewish and Greek words often appearing in Himyarite inscriptions. Royal texts included names like Isaac, Judah, and Joseph. The Himyarite rulers deliberately chose Judaism to distance themselves from Byzantium and Aksum, both of which pressured the Himyarites to convert to Christianity. The Jewish Himyarite kingdom lasted for nearly 2 centuries, until the early 6th century when King Yusuf Asar, known by the nickname Du Nuwas, meaning curly, came to power. Like his predecessors, he practiced Judaism. According to Byzantine sources, he initiated persecutions against Christian communities within his kingdom, prompting Aksum to use this as a pretext for intervention. The severity of these persecutions is hard to determine. Many scholars suggest that Aksum was simply looking for an excuse to invade and seize the first opportunity. Regardless, in 525, the Aksumite armies, supported by the Byzantine fleet, crossed the strait and decisively defeated Du Nuwas's forces. Following this defeat, the king took his own life by riding into the turbulent sea. The Aksumites expanded their control over all of southern Arabia, looting the region, enslaving many people, and forcibly baptizing a large number as well. They appointed Sumefa Ashwa, a local noble who had just converted to Christianity, as king. However, he was just a puppet under Ethiopian protection, and his rule was short-lived. In 533, Abraha, one of the invasion leaders, took advantage of his soldiers' unwillingness to return to Ethiopia, leading a rebellion and taking power. For more than 30 years, Abraha ruled Yemen with some independence, officially recognizing Aksum's authority while essentially governing on his own. He repaired the Great Dam of Marib, built a magnificent church in Sana'a, and aimed to make Yemen the main Christian hub in the area. According to Islamic tradition, around 570, in the year of the elephant, Abraha set out with an army and war elephants to the north, intending to destroy the Kaaba in Mecca and redirect pilgrims to the Grand Church in Sana'a. However, the campaign failed. Along the way, Abraha's troops suffered heavy non-combat losses due to an outbreak of smallpox and measles. It was in this year, according to Islamic tradition, that the Prophet Muhammad was born. Abraha's rule ended sometime between 570 and 575, when the Sassanid Shah Khosrow gathered a group of several hundred noble Iranians who had been convicted of various crimes. He put them under the command of a leader named Variz and sent them to conquer Yemen, with orders not to return without victory. The campaign was a success, the Axumites were driven out, and South Arabia became an Iranian province. The descendants of those Iranian warriors, known as the Abna, or sons, became the ruling elites of Yemen and held their status until the rise of Islam. In 630, they welcomed the envoys of the Prophet Muhammad into Sana'a without resistance and embraced Islam, marking the end of the millennial history of South Arabian statehood. While the Himyarite kings were rising and falling in southern Arabia, the northern part of the peninsula was becoming increasingly drawn to the centuries-long rivalry between the Byzantine Empire and Sasanian Iran. Both empires relied on Arab tribes as buffer states and proxy armies. On the Byzantine side stood the Ghassanids, an Arab Christian tribe. They migrated from southern Arabia sometime in the second half of the 3rd century AD and settled in the Levant, in the territories of modern Syria, Jordan, and Israel. By 473, they had become federates of the Byzantine Empire. Their capital was located in Jabayah on the Golan Heights, and their influence spread through the tribal alliances in the region, reaching as far as Yathrib, the future Medina. The most powerful Ghassanid ruler was Al-Harith ibn Jabala, who ruled from 529 to 569. Early in his reign, Emperor Justinian granted him the title of Patrician, the highest rank Byzantium could bestow on a foreign ruler, and recognized him as the supreme leader of all of the empire's Arab allies. Yet the alliance was not without tension. The Ghassanids followed Miaphysite Christianity, which was regarded as heretical in Constantinople. Al-Harith actively supported the Syrian Miaphysite Church and helped restore its influence. This angered the Byzantine Church. Over time, religious disputes weakened the alliance, and under the rule of Al-Harith's successor, Al-Mundir III, relations with Byzantium deteriorated completely. On the side of Sasanian Iran stood the Lakhmids, an influential Arab tribe with their capital at Al-Hira in southern Iraq. Like the Ghassanids, the Lakhmids were Christians, but they followed Nestorianism, which stood in opposition to both Byzantine Christianity and the Miaphysite doctrine of the Ghassanids. Wars between the Ghassanids and the Lakhmids were constant. The Ghassanids were backed by Byzantium, while the Lakhmids were supported by the Sasanians. As a result, Arab Christians fought against other Arab Christians in conflicts driven by the interests of great empires. The Lakhmid king Al-Mundir III ibn al-Numan, who ruled from 503 to 554, received from Shah Khosrow I control over a large part of Arabia, including territories along the coast of the Persian Gulf. Over time, Lakhmid influence expanded even into Yemen. According to some accounts, the governors collected tribute for Persia as far as Medina. In 554, the Ghassanids won a major victory over the Lakhmids near Qanasrin. Later, in 578, they captured and burned Al-Hira, the Lakhmid capital. This defeat caused the Persians to lose confidence in the Lakhmids as reliable allies. The Sasanian Shah Khosrow II removed and executed the last Lakhmid king, Al-Numan III, and annexed the Lakhmid kingdom. The decision had serious consequences. A revolt broke out among the Arab tribes and culminated in the Battle of Di-Qar in 609. In that battle, Arab forces achieved a significant victory over the Persian army. Some historians believe that the annexation of the Lakhmid kingdom was a strategic mistake by the Sasanians. By eliminating their own buffer state, the Persians exposed their frontier. When the Muslim conquest began just a few decades later, the Sasanian Empire no longer had the network of allied states that had previously helped contain threats from Arabia. Now let us turn to the Hijaz, a narrow rocky strip along the coast of the Red Sea. It was here that the cities most important for the future world religion emerged, Mecca and Medina. According to Islamic tradition, Mecca has existed since the beginning of humanity. Adam built the first Kaaba at the place that God revealed to him as the center of the earth, After the Great Flood, it disappeared, and for thousands of years this site remained forgotten. Later, Ibrahim and his son Ishmael rebuilt the Kaaba. If we return to historical evidence, we find that already in the 1st century BC, the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, drawing on an even earlier author, Agatharchides of Cnidus, wrote that along the coast of the Red Sea there existed a sanctuary that was very sacred and highly revered by all of the Arabs. In the 2nd century AD, the Greek geographer Claudius Ptolemy marked on his map of Arabia a city called Makaraba, with coordinates that roughly correspond to the location of Mecca. Many scholars believe that this refers to the same place. The name Makaraba likely derives from the ancient Arabian word mikrab, meaning temple. The first, more or less reliable written reference to Mecca dates to the late 6th or early 7th century. Unfortunately, systematic archaeological research in the area of Mecca has hardly been conducted. Large-scale construction in the 20th and 21st centuries destroyed much of the potential evidence of the ancient city. Ironically, Mecca, the most famous city of Arabia, remains one of the least studied from a historical perspective. In any case, by the 5th century AD, Mecca clearly already existed as a religious and commercial center. From an economic perspective, this is rather puzzling. The city lies in conditions extremely unfavorable for agriculture. There are no major sources of fresh water, rainfall is minimal, and the climate is extremely arid. Despite this, the population of Mecca had already reached several thousand people. The foundation of Mecca's economy was its religious monopoly over the Kaaba, one of the most important sanctuaries of the Muslim world, which even before Islam served as the central cult site of Arabia. According to tradition, around 360 idols stood inside the Kaaba, one representing each tribal confederation. Among them was Allah, a deity known from the pre-Islamic Abrahamic traditions. According to one account, the Kaaba may have even contained statues of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus. No tribe could attack the Kaaba without risking the anger of all the other tribes whose deities were kept within its walls. This sacred status ensured the city's security and stability. Each year, Arabs from across the peninsula made a pilgrimage to the Kaaba. It was called the Hajj and took place at a specific time of the year, during the month of Dhu al-Hijjah in the lunar calendar. Alongside it existed a smaller pilgrimage, known as the Umrah, which could be performed at any time of the year. Both traditions continued in Islam, although they were significantly reinterpreted. The Hajj was not only a religious ritual, but also a complex social institution. Each tribe traveled to the Kaaba, where its own idol was kept. This turned the pilgrimage into an annual pan-Arab gathering, where alliances were forged, disputes were settled, marriages arranged, and trade agreements negotiated. The sanctuary served as neutral ground where rival tribes could meet without the risk of bloodshed. This neutrality was ensured by 4 sacred months each year, known as Al-Ashar al-Hurum, during which any intertribal fighting was forbidden. 3 of these months followed one another and coincided with the pilgrimage season and the time of major fairs. Violating this ban was considered a grave offense. The most famous of these fairs was Souq al-Kaz, near the city of Taif. For an entire month, merchants gathered there from all parts of Arabia and even from Byzantium, Persia, and India. One of the most notable events held at the fair was the poetic competitions. A poet whose verse won at Souq al-Kaz brought his tribe honor comparable to victory in battle. The best poems of each year were written in golden letters on cloth and hung in the walls of the Kaaba. From this comes the name the Mulakat, meaning the suspended odes. Control over the Kaaba belonged to the powerful tribe of the Quraysh. Around 440 AD, a leader named Qusay ibn Kalab united the previously divided clans of the Quraysh, established control over the sanctuary, and founded the Dar el-Nadwa, a council of elders where major decisions were made. He distributed 6 sacred offices among the clans: the keeper of the keys to the Kaaba, the official responsible for providing water to pilgrims, the official responsible for feeding them, the head of the war council, the standard bearer, and the military commander. This was neither a monarchy nor a democracy. It was a carefully balanced oligarchic system in which each clan had its own role, and no single one could monopolize power. About 400 kilometers north of Mecca lay a very different city, Yathrib, which would later become known as Medina, a name that simply means the city in Arabic. The name of this settlement appears as early as the 6th century BC in the chronicles of the Babylonian king Nabonidus, and it also shows up in later sources from Egypt, Babylon, and Persia. The region where Yathrib was located was the largest agricultural zone of the Hejaz. A fertile oasis with underground water sources allowed the local population to cultivate dates and grain crops. While Mecca lived from trade and pilgrimage, Yathrib lived from the land. The leading role in Yathrib was played by 3 Jewish tribes, Banu Nadir, Banu Kainuka, and Banu Reza, who had settled there several centuries earlier. They were the main moneylenders, armorers, and major landowners of the oasis, and were part of a wider network of Jewish communities scattered across northwestern Arabia. Alongside them lived Arab tribes, many of whom also practiced Judaism. In the 6th century, the economic system that had endured for centuries began to change. Continuous wars between Byzantium and the Sassanid Empire led many merchants from the east to choose Arabia as a safer route to the Mediterranean. This shift in trade routes temporarily turned Mecca into one of the main commercial centers of Arabia. Wealth began flowing into the city, and with it came growing inequality, something that had previously been rare. Caravans grew larger, and the gap between caravan owners and hired camel drivers widened. Old tribal obligations, like feeding the poor, protecting the weak, and helping travelers, increasingly faded into the realities of a commercial city. The verses of the Quran that would soon appear openly condemned the vices of Meccan society: cheating in weights and measures, hoarding wealth, usury, and the neglect of orphans. The Prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca around 570 AD in the year of Abraha's expedition with elephants against the city. At the same time, 2 exhausted giants, Byzantium and Persia, had just emerged from a 26-year war that had drained both of them. The Justinianic plague had swept across the Near East, deepening the crisis even further. The buffer states that had once shielded these empires from Arab tribal raids had disappeared or fallen into decline. The old balance of power was beginning to unravel. It was in this moment, in a cave on Mount Hira near Mecca, that Muhammad received his first revelation. If you made it to the end of this video, we really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Follow along on our journey through ancient civilizations and history. If you'd like to support the channel, join our Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. You get early access to new episodes, behind-the-scenes looks, and more. You can also leave a super thanks below to give us a little extra boost. If you want to listen to history on the go, check out our all-new podcast, Parabellum History. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.